Well, welcome back to In the Word today. Excited to be continuing in the Psalms. We are in Psalm 14 today, so let's switch over to that and take a look at Psalm 14. I've entitled this Sin Makes You Stupid, is what I've called this. And there's a reason for that. This is about the folly and wickedness of men in the title there that the NASB editors have added. And what this talks about is the doctrine of depravity. Now, you may have heard that before. The doctrine of depravity is sometimes misunderstood. It doesn't mean that every single person is as bad as they possibly could be, but it does mean that every single person since Adam has been tainted by sin. They are all in rebellion. That includes you and I. So when we look at this psalm, it's a solemn reminder, I think, for us of our spiritual condition before the Lord. It's no wonder that Jesus himself in his teaching in the Beatitudes, in the Sermon on the Mount, begins with a warning or an invitation, maybe, that blessed are the poor in spirit. They For the poor in spirit are those who understand and realize and embrace really their spiritual condition and know that we are dependent on God's grace every day. So let's take a look at the psalm. Begins with an admonition here or a statement. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So when the Bible calls someone a fool, this is exactly what it has in mind, that it's someone who says that there is no God. Now, in our day, there are, of course, atheists who profess that there is no God, but there are also people who live like is no God. We see that in the last half of verse 1. They're corrupt, they've committed abominable deeds. There is no one who does good. Paul is going to quote this in Romans chapter 3, making the point that it was not for the grace of God and his electing grace, no one would be saved. It says, the Lord looks down from heaven. It's as if God is searching and trying to find out if there is anyone who is righteous, anyone who understands, anyone who seeks God, and he doesn't find a single person. Not one single person that he can find. None who search for God. He says in verse 3, which will be our highlight verse today, they all turned aside together, have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Now, what's happening, according to Romans 1:18 and following, is not so much that men are ignorant of God, but they suppress their knowledge of him. So, in a certain sense, I always say there's no such thing as an atheist. And if you've ever talked to an atheist or spend much time interacting with an atheist, you find out that an atheist thinks about God almost as much, maybe more, than a theist. They're always thinking about God and how to disprove him. So, what they're doing is they're suppressing the knowledge that they have of the truth, the knowledge that they've received through general revelation, looking into the sky, into creation, into their own bodies, speaks of the creating God. And of course, when they deny the special revelation they get when someone shares the gospel or they hear a sermon or they hear a devotional and they dismiss it. The psalm goes on then, do all the workers of wickedness not know, who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? So he's asking rhetorically, don't they know about God? They're abusing God's people. They eat them up. A great picture there, a great metaphor of just devouring the godly. They are in great dread, for God is with the righteous generation. And he goes on, oh, what salvation of Israel in verse 7 should come out of Zion. So, in light of the wickedness of men and how those wicked men suppress God's people, David here calls on the Lord and longs for the salvation of Israel that comes from Zion. This, of course, is an allusion to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom, which will happen in the future, and Jesus will reign on the earth. And of course, we're looking forward to that. But let's take a look at verse 3, our highlight, our hear verse. Let's hear what God is saying to us. I want to point out three things in this verse, first of all, as we highlight it and explained it. First of all, notice that phrase, they have all turned aside, and particularly that little word all there. That means there is no exception. Everyone is against God, has turned away from him. That's our natural state. Apart from God's grace, we all turn away from him. It began in the garden, and it rolls down through history to our very own day. If you doubt that, just consider the reaction you receive when you try to share the gospel with someone or just bring Jesus into a conversation. Think about the kind of reaction you get. Think about your own pre-Christian days, your BC days, days before Christ. And if you're like me and most people, there were multiple times when people witnessed to you before you came to faith. And think about your rejection as just proof that all have turned aside. The other thing I want to point out here is that little phrase, have become corrupt. This is the corruption, I'd say, of rejection. You know, look in the mirror and you'll see the corruption that's in you. From the moment of birth, death is at work. It's a sad thing to think about, but it's also a sobering thing. We've become corrupt as we've rejected Christ. We became corrupt in Adam in the garden when the sentence of death began to be carried out in our lives. And our aging, the fact that our bodies are deteriorating, is a daily proof of our resistance and our alienation from God. And finally, in that last part of the verse there, part B, no one who does good. Our bodies and our character are flawed, is what it's saying here. Even as we grow in the Lord, our growth results in the fact that we become more and more aware that even the best efforts that we make, even the best things that we do for the Lord, are really horribly tainted with sin. I think that's one of the marks of growth in a Christian. They don't become more confident in themselves. They become more confident in the Lord and his salvation, and less confident in any ability that they may have to merit God's favor, let's say. So we've highlighted the verse there and explained it. Let's apply it. I think one of the applications that we have to take on, we can't avoid it, is to remember that our true spiritual condition is one of a body, a mind, and a spirit that's plagued by the corruption of sin. It's just a fact. We probably begin our quiet times with a confession of our sin, and it's a long, long confession sometimes. I'm reminded that Luther would somehow, when he was a Catholic, would sometimes enter into the confessional and be in the confessional for hours. To the point where his confessor would ask him to leave, just become more and more aware. But at the same time, as we become aware of our sin, I think we should also take joy in remembering that it's God's grace and nothing else that has made us completely clean by the Father through the Son. It's as we become more aware of the sinfulness of our sin, we should at the same time become more aware of the grace of God and the forgiveness that we've received, and also give thanks for the salvation that is ours through Christ. So in terms of response, so we've highlighted the verse, we've explained it, I've applied it, suggested an application, maybe you have another. Now, how do we respond? How do we take this and put it to work in our lives today? Let me suggest something. let me suggest you go to the book of Romans and read Romans 3:21 through 31. This is explaining the salvation that's become ours at the cross through the grace of God and through the propitiating death of Jesus, the satisfying sacrifice of his death. Read slowly through that and rejoice, really. Thank God that although you were totally lost and I was totally lost, that we have been saved by the grace of God the Father through the death of his Son. And now we have new life in union with him, and we are again taught by the Spirit. The Spirit is at work sanctifying us, bringing these truths home. So, brothers and sisters, I pray that as we finish today, that you may leave here a little poorer in spirit than when you started, knowing that the poor in spirit are blessed and that they will ultimately see God. God bless you, brothers and sisters.